Welcome, welcome everyone, and a good day to all of you. My name is Karl Pfeffer. I work for the International Labour Organization, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this kickoff webinar of our course, your course on Decent Work Essentials for Social Auditors Practice and Purpose. Before we begin with the webinar, first and foremost, thank you for joining and taking the time to be with us for the next hour. Secondly, also, if you have any questions, please use the question and answer button, which is at the bottom of your screen. Most of the questions we will try to answer them directly, and some of the questions we also will be responding live. And finally, we are recording this webinar, and it will be made available on the eCampus. So if you cannot stay until the end of the webinar, not a problem. It will also be made available online. Now, the first webinar is part of your learning journey, and it's also part of your onboarding process to the course. And for now, we have almost 100 participants that are registered, and I believe around 75 that are active on the eCampus. But we also are making this webinar available to the public at large for those that are still considering to register to this course. Registrations are still open until the 21st of June. So if you're still interested in joining the course, please do so and register online. For those that are not yet fully familiar with the course, I already would like to give you an overview of the main objectives of the course, of this training. We will hear them, of course, coming back throughout this webinar, but it's good to keep them in the back of your head. And first and foremost, the course wants to develop a common language and a coherent framework of understanding when we are discussing these concepts of such as decent work, responsible business conduct, international labor standards, human rights due diligence, and so forth. So this is the first big objective of the course. Secondly is that we want to deepen your knowledge on the labor component of social auditing. And this speaks to the topic of decent work, the decent work essentials. In the course, we will be unpacking in depth the decent work elements of social auditing. And the third element, the third objective of this course is the issues of you engaging as a social auditor with enterprises, specifically within the context of responsible business conduct and human rights due diligence. To conclude this brief overview, as you can see, it's a very ambitious objectives that we have set forward, but it also remains an essentials training. So that means that we do not aim to be exhaustive in the 12 hours that the course is being designed for, but we are very sure that for every experienced auditor, you will find something to learn and to reflect upon. Now, what is the plan for this webinar? In this webinar, we want to answer two questions, two introductory questions. First and foremost, why do we have a course on decent work essentials for social auditors? What brought us to the table to discuss and design a course on decent work essentials for social auditors? That is the first question that we want to answer. And the second one is more of a practical nature, is what can you expect from this training course, and what do we expect from you as a participant in this training course? Now, let's look at answering the first question, why a course on decent work essentials for social auditors? And if you look at the cover page of the information note of this training, you see that this training is a collaboration and a partnership between different international organizations and institutions, which each of their own having their own entry point and interest in organizing and contributing to such a training course. And my first person that I would like to give the floor, the first institution that I would like to give the floor is ICF, the Initiative for Compliance and Sustainability. From the start, from the beginning, they were a very active participant in designing such a course. And today, we have the pleasure to have with us Guillaume Devaux, who is the Deputy Director of ICS. Good morning, Guillaume. How are you?
Good morning, Carl. I'm fine. I'm very happy to be here today. It's very exciting to open this course with this webinar. So thanks to everybody who is connected online today, and to anybody who will be watching the webinar in replay in the future. Thank you to the ILO International Training Center, and the International Trade Center for having worked with the ICS on this project and made this project possible.
Thank you, Guillaume. Guillaume, please let us know now what was your interest, your drive, and your motivation to have to contribute and to develop such a course on decent work essentials for social auditors. Go ahead, Guillaume.
The point was to somehow make a break. Regulations are popping up everywhere of course there's the CS3D, there's the French law, the German law, the Norway law, the Australian law. There are laws everywhere on due diligence regarding human rights and social rights. And the demand for social audit is rising everywhere, which means that the pressure for quality, integrity, certification is stronger than ever. And the question we had was, auditors in this, how are they? Auditors, they are alone in the factory, facing the factory management, the coach workers, the dire working conditions, and then the pressure from the review team, from their client, the retailer, from the scheme, maybe the ICS sometimes itself. And they are in remote industrial areas on the front line for human rights. Are they happy? Are they proud? Do they like their job? How do they understand their job? The question we had was, does an auditor in Brazil conduct a social audit the same way as an auditor in China, in Italy, in France, in Morocco? Do they understand decent work the same? And if not, because that was our intuition, as we all pursue the same goal that were fixed by international organizations, wouldn't it be the right time, as regulations are popping everywhere, to go back to essentials? Not rather as a lesson, but maybe as a reflection, a pause, a break, a moment. Where are we at as auditors? Not even the audit industry, not the schemes, not the voluntary sustainable standards, but auditors themselves, to provide them a space and the material to reflect on what does decent work essentials mean for them and the job of an auditor. And so before working on this course and creating the material, we wanted to confirm the hypothesis, of course, and that's why we conducted a survey. And I would like to very warmly thank the 233 auditors who responded the ICS ILO ITC survey, which is a 40 minutes long survey on how auditors see themselves and their jobs and what are their needs. We conducted 20 hours of direct interviews with auditors to ask them the very basic essentials questions. What does decent work mean for you in your everyday job? Are you happy as an auditor? Are you proud to be an auditor? And when we asked the question, do you think auditors work the same or differently in the world? 90% of them said, we believe that auditors work differently according to whether they are employee, freelance, whether they work for this or that audit firm, whether they apply this or that scheme and standard, whether they belong to this or that culture and country in the world. 90% said auditors work differently. However, we all pursue the same goal. And then we ask, do you think that doing social audits differently across the world mean that international human rights and workers' rights are applied differently? They also said yes, which could be understood as a problem. So we decided this was the moment to come back to essential and to propose this reflection on decent work essential connected directly to auditors and social audits. Why? Because, well, first we can say that connecting to the purpose is always a risk in a training. It's the risk that the trainee will be bored and will randomly scroll to move on to something more practical. So coming back to the purpose, and that's what we've been trying to do, and auditors following the course will be the judge of that. But we've been trying first to enlighten the purpose. Why does it matter to understand why we do what we do? And second, we've methodically tried every time we were referring to the purpose of social audit to connect it directly to the auditor's job on the ground, in the factory. How can I use the core principle, the basic, the decent work theory and essentials on the audit day? How can I make sense out of it? And this is not a luxury, because in the survey I was referring to, well, 53% of auditors said that they did not know when asked what SDG number 8 is. UN Sustainable Development Goal number 8, which is decent work for all. It's exactly why auditors are waking up every day and do audits in factories. And more than 1 out of 2, 53%, do not know what SDG 8 is, which give us food for thought. And the thing is, when an auditor goes to a factory, it's not because a retailer, a client, as they say, ask them to go there. There is a bigger why behind. Knowing that the OECD guidelines on responsible business conduct were released in 1976 is not about knowing its history as a good student. It's about connecting to this history, to feel that the auditors belong to this history, is the present of this history, and to help him embody this history in the factory. So again, this course will not be an introduction. It's the essentials only. You'll find the purpose of the social audits directly connected to the practice of social auditors. So for example, the first module will provide and reflect on the big picture: responsible business conduct, business and human rights, CSR, sustainable goals. As an auditor, do I really know the difference between them? It seems the same, but there's different words. Why? Where do all those expressions come from? And how am I part of that history as an auditor? Then module 2 will be a big focus on every social audit chapters that you all know: forced labor, child labor, health and safety, working hours. But again, connecting it to the why. Why do we put the light on those chapters? What is the situation in the world regarding forced labor, child labor, health and safety? And then module 3, we are going in the factory with the factory management to understand how can I diffuse as an auditor the fear of the management? How can I use my own personality? Because I am alone in the factory. It's me, the auditor, and only me in the factory. How do I use my power, my strength, to onboard the factory management, to enhance transparency, and to feel fulfilled while doing my job? So to conclude on the why, the why of this course is how to use the history, the principles, the essentials, and the why to help you reflect and take the time to reflect on who do you want to be as an auditor, and only you have the answer, of course. And what do you do with this information we wanted to share so strongly, that auditors are so important and their mission so special for human rights, that we should have taken the time to reflect on. We hope that for younger auditors, this course will be full of knowledge and discoveries. We hope that for senior auditors, this will provide them a breathing time to appreciate what matters most to them in their job, and to wider spread when in factories or when with younger auditors, why the job is so decisive for human rights, and how to use opening and closing meetings on the factory day to embody, to diffuse this spirit of fighting for human rights. To conclude on a positive note, and not to share all the results of the survey already, because you'll discover this in module 3, but 83% of auditors declared that they were very proud to be so. We are also very proud to work in this, as we say, industry. So let's keep it this way, and let's go get the 20% of auditors that still remain to be convinced that this is a job to be very proud of. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Guillaume, and also thanks to ICS for all the support over the 2 years that this was in the process that we were developing this training course. We definitely did not go over one night of ice. Let us move over now to Emily Sims from the ILO, the manager for the ILO Help Desk for Business and on International Labor Standards. Hello, Emily.
Hello, thank you, Carl, and hello to everyone participating. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us in this very important topic. I don't want to assume that people know what ILO is, because I still get, even from my own family, where do you work again, kind of questions. So in case you don't know what the ILO is a specialized agency of the United Nations. And our job is to promote more and better jobs for workers everywhere. And the way we do that is we primarily focus actually on governments, because in an ideal world, the government is actually doing its job extremely efficiently, and no offense, there's no need for social audits, which are filling those gaps where the government has a lot of weaknesses. And the purpose of that is so that everyone in the jurisdiction of the government is protected, and not just people in particular supply chains. But of course, we don't live in an ideal world. And so we have these systems where the private sector, in terms of policies that get implemented in their supply chains or business relationships, and increasingly in their investment decisions, through in business relationships, in what is called human rights due diligence. And that's really important supplement, partly, as Guillaume was saying, is partly because it actually has a pulling up effect and a sort of awakening effect for a lot of governments that suddenly realize, oh, geez, we're not really doing our jobs as effectively as we should be doing. Carl can tell you in our human rights due diligence course, there's a fair number of government officials that come because they're very curious about human rights due diligence, and particular labor inspectors about how companies are doing human rights due diligence and the role that social auditors are playing. So the ILO is a tripartite organization, and it's supposed to be reflected at the national level as well, meaning it's not just governments or collections of governments at the international level, but also their employers and workers who are also there in the dialogues, helping to shape international instruments, conventions and recommendations, and other guiding instruments, but also at the national level. So your work is influencing not just government policy, but the employers and workers as well, and directly affecting them. So just to give you an example of why your work is so important, not just in developing countries, but developed countries. You probably can tell from my accent, I'm American. And just to take an example from my own country, or a couple of examples from my own country about why labor inspection is so, or social auditing is so important. First of all, a very depressing report came out in 2024 from the Economic Policy Institute, which is a very well-regarded research think tank. It found that workers are underpaid, meaning their wages are being stolen from them, to the tune of about $50 billion per year. The U.S. Undersecretary for Labor had come a few years ago to the ILO and had a meeting with ILO officials who are Americans. And in that meeting, he talked about labor inspection and said that on average, an American enterprise can expect to be inspected once every 44 years. In other words, a lot of them are never inspected, and the bulk of their efforts are concentrated on a few high-risk areas and only depend on complaints to trigger inspections otherwise. And a lot of workers are too uninformed about their rights or too timid and worried about retaliation to actually feel competent or strong enough to actually trigger such an inspection. And then, of course, for those of you working in the US, there are a growing number of states that are rolling back legal protections. And as you know, in your social audits, the benchmark is often national law and international labor standards, whichever protection is the highest. So especially around minimum age, you now have in certain states, people as young as 12 can be working in hazardous sectors like agriculture and even slaughterhouses, and engaged in night work. So your social audits, which are revealing, even if they're complying with national law, serious gaps in protection for those workers, is super important. So that's all to say that that's why ILO works with government, but also directly with enterprises. And by enterprises, we mean mainly buyers and suppliers, but increasingly, as I said, investors. And so I contributed a lot technically to these modules you'll be going through and making very very conscious to make sure that what we are telling you as auditors, we're putting it into your framework, but all the principles, all the key messages are the exact same ones we're telling buyers, suppliers, investors, and other private sector actors, such as multi-stakeholder or industry initiatives. Because one of our big obsessions is that you're all having the same conversation between yourselves, among yourselves, so that there's a shared understanding and you can get to scale so much quicker. And it's only with getting to scale that work in the area of private initiatives goes from protecting a few more fortunate workers who are in a spotlight within a social auditing context, a supply chain context, and not forgetting all those others that aren't. So your contribution is much wider than you probably imagine, although it's so vital to the workers that you're directly looking at their conditions and trying to protect in the immediate instance. So, but we're also working with reporting guidelines to make sure that they're also on the same page, because you have to realize, I suppose a lot of you already are aware, but it's not just that your auditing reports are going to the entity that was audited, whether it be a farm or a particular factory or a collection of factories for a particular supplier, but of course also the buyer, either because they commissioned the audit directly or because that is a contractual obligation of the supplier to then send the audited report to the buyer. But it's also going to being aggregated into reports of those buyers that get funneled into data analysts, data aggregators and data analysts, and make their way up to financial institutions, whether they be commercial banks or financial institutions. And you can we work with organizations like the Sustainable Stock Exchanges, UNEP-FI, and the Principles for Responsible Investment, again, having the same conversations with them. So that's why I am so excited, and Carl can verify when he told me we're going to be working with social auditors. I said, yes, yes, because you guys are the linchpin of the entire process. Because Carl and I teach a joint human rights due diligence course, and teaching enterprises and all these other groups that I talked about, like labor inspectors, that for whatever reason they're very curious and come to our course. About human rights due diligence, which you may or may not be familiar with the process, but a lot of it starts after the policy is developed, and they have general internal policies. The next step is the risk mapping. And the risk mapping they can do fairly easily, although not imperfectly, sometimes imperfectly, at the country level and the sectoral level. But the big mystery is what happens at the enterprise level. And a lot of companies are very tempted to say, well, too risky at the country level. Often they can't substitute away at the sector level. If they need a particular input, there aren't necessarily other sectors that can provide it outside of a particular sector. But the country level, they can shop around for countries that are maybe looking less risky. What's the problem with that? Well, Guillaume talked about the Sustainable Development Goals, and SDG 8 is one of them. But and SDG 8, it talks about decent work and inclusive economic growth. And the critical thing there is that we never, never, never tell a company, oh, well, avoid riskier countries, precisely because that may be the one gem in an industrial district of rather catastrophic is too hyperbolic, but really depressing working conditions, and have a demonstration effect, and to reward that company that is trying so hard to do things differently than their peers in their neighborhood, is such a massive positive development impact in a country. But of course, a company can't just say, oh, well, for the sake of development, I'll just source from this company and cross my fingers and hope everything is okay with this company. They need to actually know. They can talk with the supplier or a potential supplier, but until they actually know what's going on in the ground, which won't necessarily come out with their sourcing specialists or supplier management, the supply chain management specialists, because they'll always be seeing the best side of the supplier, because they'll put on their best, appearances for their customer. So having a social audit where there's a much deeper reality check can make that huge, huge difference. And I just want to end, because I don't want to take up too much time, with a little story about how you all can change the world. You probably, or maybe not, I don't know, if you're car aficionados, you may have heard of this company, Continental. Continental produces auto parts, mainly tires, but not exclusively, other parts as well. And it's a German company. It's a pretty big company, actually. And it's one of the places it's producing is in Mexico for the Mexico, Canada, US market. And so it had persistent problems with working time in one of its Mexico factories. And the HR was trying so hard to get them to change, but they're just like, we can't do it. We just can't. What you're asking is unrealistic. So after several audits, they failed an audit. They failed big time. And BMW dumped them as a supplier. And if you know anything about the auto industry, there are only a few big actors. And the word got around, and they were in crisis mode. And you would think that would make them really angry at the audit. But the human rights manager, a human resources / human rights manager, a guy named Federico, great guy, he was delighted. This was exactly the wake-up call. His factory there that was persistently ignoring his pleas to take human rights due diligence seriously, this is what they needed. And they got on the job straight away, and in good German fashion, they got all the data behind them. They went to the root causes, and they not only fixed the problem that they had sworn up and down was no way to fix, they did it in a way that actually saved them money. So he is the world's biggest advocate for social audits, but I am sure his story is not unique. And there are lots and lots of companies, even if they don't give you a bear hug coming through the factory doors to see them, they still, in the end of the day, will appreciate your honest assessment, and to be able to think very seriously about what they're doing right and how they can congratulate themselves and what they need to focus on and improve in the future, hopefully in collaboration with the workers and the buyers who may be one of the root causes. So just a thank you for your hard work and a strong appreciation from my side. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Emily. Also with this last story, it illustrates the word of purpose that is in the title of this course. It's not only about practice, but also both Emily and Guillaume highlights. It's also about the purpose of a social auditor, the thing that why you wake up in the morning and you do your job. So a lot of the training course also goes into that purpose of your job as a social auditor. And then thirdly, from in the beginning, we also are working very closely with the ITC, the other ITC, not ITC ILO, but International Trade Center. And for that purpose, we have Akshata Limai with us. Hello, Akshata, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Carl, Guillaume, Emily, and everyone who's joined us today. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Akshata Limai, and I lead work at the International Trade Center. I'm also joined by my colleague Shamina Marcy, who contributed to this course. So shout out to Shamina, who's also present with us. I will take the opportunity to present on behalf of both of us. So just to give you a little bit of a background, because I just as Emily said, I don't want to assume everyone knows what ITC does or this ITC does. So the International Trade Center, we are a joint agency of the United Nations and World Trade Organization. And the mandate of our organization is to really support and work with small businesses in developing countries in building their competitiveness and connecting them to the international markets. One important piece of this puzzle in the entire process is also ensuring sustainability in trade, which brings me to the team that I work with. It's called the Trade for Sustainable Development Program, and it's a group of technical experts on sustainability, focusing on different value chain actors in supply chains across various sectors. I think both Guillaume and Emily have really brilliantly articulated the why of this course, and which makes it a no-brainer for us to be here in this exciting space in being able to contribute to this this course that will help social auditors. Now, we don't normally directly work with social auditors, but why it's important in this large mission of working towards sustainability in trade, as we've all been discussing, the increasing demand for social audits to prove sustainability of the businesses. Now, when we talk about the proliferation of, say, sustainability standards and the growing importance of regulation in this space, they all need to show or prove credentials of their sustainable business practices, which includes decent work, good working conditions, labor rights that are safeguarded in the business models, etc. And companies are able to do that through social auditors. So of course, when we got the opportunity to contribute to this training course, it's not an opportunity we wanted to leave. Now, how do we come in, or what's our entry point, and why did we contribute? So one particular tool that I wanted to also share with everyone about is the standards map tool that our team has been developing over the course of more than 10 years. It's called standards map. Now, Standards Map is a global public good. It's a tool that allows us to disseminate information in a neutral and in a transparent way on different sustainability standards. Now, when I use the word, or when I use the term sustainability standards, it really is larger in scope, I would say, which includes not only voluntary sustainability standards, but also audit protocols, certification processes, etc. And currently, we have about 357 standards listed on the standards map tool, but the data that we collect from various sustainability standards, we have about 1,500 plus data points that we collect. Now, what it allows us is a large repository of information. And one touch point that we had here was, as Carl mentioned at the beginning, is common language and framework. So while we have all this information and database in the back end, we can empower social auditors with this information on decent work, on human rights due diligence processes, to really provide this common language and some practical information and guidances that we've collected. So what we did essentially was we synthesized this information on various sustainability standards relating to textile and clothing sector, really going through the documentation of sustainability standards, their audit protocols, the normative requirements, but also some practical guidances that comes through the guidance protocols or guidance documents for auditors that the standards provide. So it really has been a complementarity, I would say, of how ITC has come in to support ICS and ILO ITC in putting together the pieces for this course that I'm very excited to hear feedback from all our participants. And so that's basically why we are here. One additional point that I wanted to mention is that while ITC's mandate is to work with small businesses, one of our areas or one of our areas of interest is really to be working also with young entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs. So when we shared about this course with our colleagues across the house, we were told that there might be some interest amongst the YE community of ITC that works with youth entrepreneurs. And I believe some of you are also joining us for this webinar today. So even though this course isn't like a starter pack in introducing the world of social auditing, what it does allow is provide you and empower you with more information on the importance really of understanding and being aware of the role of social auditing, especially in the context of the upcoming regulation and the push for human rights due diligence, decent work requirements, etc. So I'm very happy to hear that some of you have joined the session. I hope you find this to be helpful and that you would be perhaps curious to also learn more about it. And some of you may also be curious to take up social auditing as a career path, even because, as Guillaume was mentioning, that there is only increasing demand for the same. And while 83% of people, of social auditors who took the survey say that they are proud, our aim is not only to ensure the rest of the 20% feel the same, but to add more to this network of social auditors and have really a future of social auditors who are proud to do this important role in the larger scheme of sustainability in trade and business. So perhaps I will stop there and really thank you for your time and happy to hear your feedback as well. So we learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshata, and also thank you, Shamina, is also here in the webinar for the support and the collaboration over the past 2 years in making this training course a reality. Now, let's go now into the second question of today's webinar is what can you expect from this course and what is expected from you to get to the end of this training course and be able to download your certificate that we are providing if you're successfully at the end. Well, here you can find an overview of the different elements that we have in the course. So the course, we will be offering you 3 webinars, of which this webinar is already the first one. The course also consists of 2 self-guided modules and 1 podcast. More about that in a few minutes. There is a final quiz I could also call it an exam, but let's make it fun. And we call it a quiz, the final quiz. And if you pass the quiz, you will be able to download your certificate of participation, which is the fourth element of the course. Now, a very strong enabler to make sure that you make the most of this course is ensuring you have proper access to the eCampus. I hope everybody that is now in this has been onboarded and enrolled to the course has proper access to the eCampus. The eCampus is your online learning hub for this training course. Everything will take place through the eCampus. Discussion platforms, accessing of references, materials, and so downloading of certificates, everything will take place on the eCampus platform. But having access to the eCampus platform also allows you to access other trainings that are being provided by the ITC ILO online for free. So you will see if you go to the ITC ILO website, there are other trainings that you can also pick from, and that I am sure will be beneficial for you as a social auditor. So make sure you have access to the eCampus, and if not, there are two very important email addresses for that purpose. If you have problems with the mechanics of the eCampus or access to the eCampus, you can write to ecampussupport@itcilo.org, and they will come immediately, normally very quickly, with you with a solution. But for any other question, you can write to mnegsc@itcilo.org. Now, the 3 webinars, although it's a self-guided online training, we decided from the beginning to also add a human face to it and have some interaction with the participants. And even if we have 100 participants or 200 participants, we want to give it a level of realness, or a level of reality and interaction with the people that are behind this training course. And therefore, we have set up 3 webinars. And the next webinars, they will be really webinars where you will have easier interaction with the speakers. So we have today's opening webinar, which will be concluded in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Then we normally will have within 2 or 3 weeks what we call a technical webinar on labor issues. And there you will have the opportunity to engage back with Emily Sims, who will then share with her the work that she's doing on the ILO Help Desk for Business on International Labor Standards, which I already can tell you is one of the best tools that are out there if you want to understand better the linkages between business operations and international labor standards. It will also give you the opportunity to have an exchange with Emily, a dialogue with Emily on maybe some questions that are arising, technical questions that are arising from the different modules that you will be going to. And then the final webinar, the closing webinar, is about the social skills part and engaging with enterprises. And this is about the research that Guillaume has done on how social auditors can engage with companies within the framework of human rights due diligence, or in the case that you face resistance or providing feedback on outcomes of your audit. So that will be the closing webinar. Dates for those 2 webinars will be communicated very shortly. So keep an eye on the updates on the eCampus, and in any case, you will receive several emails from the ITC ILO updating you on when they will take place. Also, these webinars will in any case be uploaded on the eCampus in case the time zone doesn't work out for you, or in case you already have other commitments and engagements. Now, okay. The content, what is now the content that we are offering? It's already been highlighted briefly also by Guillaume and by Emily and by Chapa. But we have 3 distinct modules for you. The first module is what we call the building blocks for a common understanding. And in this first module, which I think will be around 1 to 2 hours, we want to introduce you to the bigger framework, the big framework of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And from there, go down to the elements of responsible business conduct, decent work, international labor standards. What are they? How they are developed? How can you understand them? What are definitions, correct the different definitions that are being used? We also will be looking to responsible business conduct, the different frameworks that are often or mainly being referenced in the different multi-stakeholder initiatives or other frameworks such as the ILO M&E Declaration, the OECD M&E Guidelines, and of course, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. We also will look into these legislatory frameworks that have been put in place and that are significantly shaping, altering, and pushing forward social auditing practice. And in the first model, we also will talk about the standards map that Akshata was referencing to, another useful tool that can be used by social auditors. The second model, Model 2 Labor Rights, is basically a collection of 7 large sub-modules. So I'm pretty sure that most of your time you will be spending in this Model 2, where we are having 7 different sub-modules which are covering the fundamental principles and rights at work. So there's a module on child labor, one module on forced labor, there's a module on non-discrimination, there's another module on freedom of association and collective bargaining, and a module on occupational safety and health, a safe and healthy working environment. And in addition to that, we also have added 2 more modules because they're often also part of your social auditing practice, working hours and overtime, and a final module on remunerations and benefits. Now, the structure of each module is the same, sub-module is the same under Module 2. We always look in what are the issues, what are we looking at, what are the challenges when we talk, for example, about child labor or forced labor. A second element is now, how are they grounded in international labor standards? How are international labor standards shaping definitions, red flags, etc.? A third element that the model will unpack are risk factors at the sector level, at the geographical level. The models also give some guidance on what it is that companies can do, what can be a positive reaction to some of these challenges that companies can face. And then finally, and this is of course where you as a social auditor will be mostly interested in, how can we integrate this knowledge into the auditing sector, practice. So one big section of each model will look into what are now the implications for you as a social auditor. There is where we're looking at documentation review, observations, engaging with stakeholders, interviewing with workers, triangulation, and so forth. Now, we don't only want to share with you knowledge and expertise, we also would like to hear from you. So you will see that in Module 2, every sub-module has a lot of different invitations for you to participate in discussion forums, where we will ask you, what is your reaction? What is your experience? What is your best practice? So for you also to contribute your knowledge and share your knowledge with the other social auditors that are part of this training. And then the final model, which is not a real model, is a podcast. Of course, it's not us having a podcast, it's an artificial intelligence podcast nowadays, but it's a reflection and an overview of the study with the over 200 auditors that was conducted by the ITC ILO, the International Trade Center, and ICS. Again, here, the podcast here is to start an online discussion. So also here, you will see there is a discussion platform link where we ask you, are you agreeing with what is being said, or do you would like to add experiences in some of the issues that are being mentioned in this podcast? As said, this will take you more or less 12 hours. It might be a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. There is a ton of references also that we make available for you in case you would like to learn more. As said earlier, 12 hours is pretty limited, but we really have tried to be as comprehensive as possible in the time that is given to us. Now, if you have gone through these self-guided models and podcasts, you've been active on the discussion forums, you can now go to the final quiz. The final quiz are 10 simple questions about the content. And once you have gone through them successfully, I think the pass gate is 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10. Well, you will see how much you'll need. You will be able to download your certificate. It will be a digital certificate. It's a real certificate, but digital. You will see. You can even scan it, put it online in case you can put it on your social media, and in this way also recommending it to others. Now, there is a deadline. The deadline is the 31st of August. So the course is literally running, although it's self-guided, and you can do it at your own time, at your own pace, anytime, anywhere, there is a deadline. You have to finish the course by the 31st of August, because then we will close the course. You will still have access then for another 6 to 12 months of the training materials, but we will close the training course by the 31st of August. There we also will review all the feedback and the evaluation that you are giving us, because the idea is that we will be updating the course after this first rollout and do a second course later in the year or early next year. Now, this brings me to the end of this webinar, this presentation. I'm quickly checking if there are any burning questions there, but I see they have been answered by my colleagues. So I would say thank you again for being with us in the last 15 minutes. I hope you're even more enthusiastic now on going through the self-guided e-learning models. For those that have not yet registered, take note, registrations are still open until the 21st of June. If you have any questions, please write us at the email below. We will be responding immediately to any queries or questions you might have about participation, registration, or anything else. So I would like to conclude here once again, thanking the colleagues Emily, Guillaume, Akshata, Shimina, and all the others that have been involved from close by, from far away. And also to the participants. We really hope you will enjoy the training course. As said, we also would love to hear your feedback and areas where we can improve it. And who knows, we see each other in another training webinar or training course. Thanks a lot.